Well, a startling new study has found that child marriages are still going on right here in Canada. Worse than that, it's still legal here. A new study finding that 85% of these marriage certificates were young girls, typically marrying much older men. How long has this been going on in Canada? How can it be stopped? And how can we protect children from this? With more on this, let's go to Alissa Koski, co-author of the study, assistant professor of the Department of Epidemiology, Biostatistics, and Occupational Health at McGill. How you doing, Alissa?
Good morning, Elias. I'm doing all right, all things considered.
So, yeah, I know we're all going through this pandemic. Listen, I saw the study. And I was floored because, in my mind, Canada has been sort of this righteous world leader looking across the globe saying, hey, we're going to work hard to stop child marriages around the world. And then it's happening right here at home. Tell our listeners what really is going on here.
That surprised me, too. And that's actually what motivated some of this research. I've spent the last few years looking at child marriage internationally, but I realized that the practice remains completely legal here. So, as you said, even though Canada has worked really hard to place itself at the forefront of global efforts to end this practice, we're seemingly unwilling to take some of the steps that are necessary to do that at home. Mm-hmm. So I went to each province and territory and asked them to tell me how many marriage certificates they had granted to children under the age of 18 since the year 2000. And that's where we get that number, 3,687.
And in your study, you're able to see that it's it's not, let's say, a 17-year-old marrying a 19-year-old. You're seeing disparities here, right, in age.
You know, that does happen sometimes, a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old. And I think that's what we would often like to tell ourselves about this practice, that, it must be two young people who are really in love. But yeah, when we looked at the marriage certificates, we were able to look at the age discrepancy between spouses, and we found that in more than 30% of cases, these were minor girls marrying men who were at least 5 years older than them, and in some cases, more than 20 years older than them.
Jeez.
So there is a substantial age difference.
Now, in other Western democracies, has there been something done with legislation to guard against this? Like, are there other countries that are handling this a lot better? Or is this happen everywhere?
You know, there's actually quite a bit of hypocrisy in wealthy Western nations on this issue. Some countries do actually prohibit all marriage before the age of 18, but many countries in Western Europe actually continue to permit marriage under the age of 18 too. So Canada is far from being alone in having this discrepancy between foreign policy and domestic law. That said, many countries in parts of the world like Sub-Saharan Africa or South Asia are actually improving their laws. So in some cases, like Malawi, for example, the law actually prohibits all marriage before the age of 18. So in that sense, they're a bit more restrictive than Canada is.
We're with Alissa Koski, co-author of a new study from McGill University. It's a study on child marriages, and that has found that it still continues here in Canada. So, Alissa, listen, you're the one who's done the study. You looked into this. I'm just the radio host that knows nothing. But here's where my mind goes. When I hear it's happening in Canada, I say to myself, okay, this has to do with maybe people from religious, cultural communities. Perhaps this is continuing from people that have recently come into the country, immigrants, and they're continuing with the old ways. Does your research tell us who's doing this? Where is this happening in Canada?
Well, you're certainly not alone in those two thoughts coming to your mind first. And that's why I looked at that a little bit. Much of what's been written about child marriage in Canada focuses almost obsessively on practices among small religious communities, often in British Columbia, to a lesser extent in Quebec. But my research shows that this practice is happening in every province and territory over the past 20 years. So it's not restricted to any one part of the country, which certainly suggests that it's not restricted to any one small religious group either. And in terms of the immigration issue, we saw that in previous years, in the early 2000s, children who were born outside of Canada were in fact more likely to get married as children than those who were born here in Canada. But in more recent years, that's changed. So
Really?
by 2016, it's actually children who are born in the country who are more likely to be married as children than immigrants coming in.
You mentioned, the specific cases we've heard in the past in British Columbia, here in Quebec, but you also say you're seeing it in every province in the country. But does it go to a sort of a small religious community in all of these provinces that is out there, or is there something else going on?
It's certainly possible that religion plays a role, but I think that the geographic spread of this issue indicates that it's not one specific religious group, right?
Yeah.
For example, if we think of families who are more conservative, who may also be more religious, who are concerned, for example, about a young girl who becomes pregnant before the age of 18 and feels that that pregnancy means that the child needs to get married, for example. That could be something that contributes to this practice. But I don't think that that's specific to any one particular religious group, right? That could be any number of religious traditions.
So does your research lead you to solutions here? And does it come down to, pass a law, you can't get married before you're 18? Or would that create other problems?
Well, I think that's one way to go about it, right? And that the interesting thing is that's exactly what Canada is advocating for abroad. We are telling other countries that they should change their laws, strengthen their laws to prevent marriage before the age of 18. Obviously, we haven't done that here. So if we did change our law to prevent marriage before the age of 18, that would at least bring our laws in line with our international commitments. Now, that said, a lot of these child marriages are actually common law marriages. Right? And a change in the law isn't going to prohibit a common law marriage from happening. So we need to do more than just change the law. We need to understand to a greater extent why this is happening and try to intervene on some of those root causes.
Alissa, we're out of time here, but a super interesting subject. Congratulations on this study. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of attention. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.